She threw the mop at his feet. "Pick it up." Dr. Victoria Sterling commanded, her voice cutting through the hospital corridor like a scalpel. "And next time, keep your daughter out of my restricted wing. This is a place for people who heal, not for janitors who dream." Marcus Williams bent down slowly. His right hand trembled as he gripped the mop handle. Behind him, his 9-year-old daughter Amara watched with tears streaming down her face. He said nothing. He just cleaned. But what Victoria didn't know, what nobody in that billion-dollar hospital knew, was that the man she'd just humiliated had once saved her father's life on a battlefield she couldn't imagine. And that tattoo, hidden beneath his sleeve, was about to change everything. Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The mop hit the floor with a wet slap that echoed through the VIP corridor of Meridian Medical Center. Dr. Victoria Sterling stood over Marcus Williams, her white coat pristine, her eyes cold as surgical steel. 3 board members flanked her like soldiers awaiting orders. A security guard shifted uncomfortably near the elevator. "I asked you a question," Victoria said. "Why was your child in my research wing?" Marcus kept his head down. His voice was steady quiet. "She wandered off while I was cleaning the 3rd floor, ma'am. It won't happen again." "It won't happen again." She repeated his words like they were contaminated. "Do you know what's in that wing equipment, worth more than you'll earn in 10 lifetimes? Trials that could save thousands of lives. And your daughter was sitting on the floor touching things she has no business touching." "She was reading a medical journal, ma'am. She didn't touch any equipment." "She was reading." Victoria laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "A janitor's daughter reading medical journals. What's next? She wants to be a surgeon." Amara stood frozen by the water fountain, her small hands clutching a worn notebook to her chest. The notebook was filled with drawings of hearts and lungs, carefully labeled in her 9-year-old handwriting. She'd been so proud to show her father the diagram of the circulatory system she'd copied from a textbook. Now she just wanted to disappear. "She's interested in medicine," Marcus said. His jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "I encourage her to learn. You encourage her." Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "Let me tell you something about encouragement. I grew up in this hospital. My father built it from nothing. I went to Harvard Medical School, graduated top of my class, and spent 15 years proving I deserved to stand where I'm standing. That's what it takes. Not reading journals on a dirty floor." She glanced at Amara, then back at Marcus. "Some people are born to heal. Others are born to clean up after them. Teach your daughter the difference before she wastes her life on impossible dreams." Marcus's right hand trembled. He pressed it against his thigh to hide the shake. "Is there anything else, ma'am?" Victoria studied him for a moment, the graying temples, the calloused hands, the uniform that hung slightly loose on his frame. She saw nothing worth remembering. "Just stay out of my way, both of you." She turned and walked toward the elevator, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The board members followed. The security guard exhaled and pretended to check his phone. Marcus stood alone in the corridor, the mop still at his feet. Then he felt a small hand slip into his. "Daddy." He looked down. Amara's eyes were red, her lower lip trembling. The notebook was crushed against her chest like a shield. "Yeah, baby girl. Am I not supposed to want to be a doctor?" Something cracked inside Marcus Williams. Not broke. He'd been broken before, and this wasn't that. This was something sharper. Something that cut into the place where he kept the memories of who he used to be. He crouched down, ignoring the pain in his knees, and looked his daughter in the eyes. "Listen to me. You can be anything you want to be. Doctor, surgeon, researcher, anything. Don't let anyone tell you different, especially not someone who doesn't know anything about you." But she said, "I heard what she said, and she's wrong." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You know what I see when I look at you. I see your mama's heart. I see someone who's going to change the world. And I see a girl who's already smarter than half the doctors in this building." Amara sniffled. "Really? Really? Now go wait for me in the break room. There's a vending machine with those peanut butter crackers you like. I'll be there in 10 minutes. She hesitated, then hugged him fiercely. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, baby. More than anything." He watched her walk away, her small shoulders slowly straightening as she moved down the hall. When she turned the corner, Marcus finally let out the breath he'd been holding. He picked up the mop, and he kept cleaning. Edgar Morrison had been an anesthesiologist for 41 years. He'd seen everything: miracles and tragedies, heroes and cowards, the absolute best and worst of human nature. At 67, he'd earned the right to trust his instincts, and his instincts were screaming. He watched Marcus Williams from the doorway of the supply room, coffee growing cold in his hand. The janitor was reorganizing the crash cart supplies, and something about the way he moved made Edgar's pulse quicken. The medications were grouped by function. Emergency, first, secondary support behind. Expiration dates faced forward. Everything positioned for maximum speed during a code. That wasn't how janitors organized supplies. That was how trauma surgeons organized them. Edgar had served in Desert Storm. He'd worked alongside Army medics and Navy surgeons in conditions that would make most civilians vomit. He knew what military training looked like, even when the person tried to hide it. Marcus Williams moved like a soldier, like a doctor, like someone who'd spent years making life or death decisions in seconds. "Excuse me." Marcus turned. "Yes, sir." "I'm Dr. Morrison, anesthesiology." Edgar stepped into the room, studying the man's face. "That's an interesting way you've organized those supplies." Marcus's expression didn't change. "Just trying to be helpful, sir. Figured if everything's easy to find, the nurses won't have to waste time during emergencies." "Where'd you learn that system?" "Just common sense, I suppose." Edgar nodded slowly. He didn't believe it for a second. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus Williams." "You serve—" The question hung in the air. Marcus's right hand twitched against the cart handle. "Long time ago, sir." "What branch?" "Army." "MOS." A long pause. Marcus met Edgar's eyes, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. Behind the janitor's uniform, behind the quiet voice and downcast eyes, Edgar saw something else. Something haunted. Something proud. 68W, Marcus said quietly. "Combat medic. Then I went to medical school." Edgar's coffee cup nearly slipped from his fingers. "You're a doctor." "Was." Marcus held up his right hand. The tremor was visible now, a constant small shake that he couldn't control. "IED in Kandahar. Nerve damage. Can't operate anymore." "My God." Edgar leaned against the doorframe. "What unit?" 28th Combat Support Hospital." The coffee cup did slip, then shattering on the floor. Edgar didn't notice. The 28th CSH, the unit that... He stopped, his mind racing. There was a surgeon. They called him the Resurrector. He saved more lives in one deployment than most doctors save in a career. Story was, he disappeared after being wounded. Marcus was already on his knees, picking up the broken pieces of the cup, mopping up the spilled coffee with paper towels from his cart. "Lots of stories about the war, sir. Most of them exaggerated." "Look at me." Marcus stopped. Slowly, he stood, the broken ceramic still in his hands. Edgar's voice was barely a whisper. "You're him, aren't you? You're the one who saved Sterling." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Henry Sterling, 20 years ago. Kandahar province. He was volunteering at a refugee camp when militia attacked. A civilian doctor shot twice should have died on that table. But some army surgeon kept him alive for 4 hours in a tent with failing generators." Marcus said nothing. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere past Edgar's shoulder. "Henry never found out who saved him. The surgeon refused recognition, refused medals, just disappeared. But Henry talked about him for years, said that surgeon was the reason he built this hospital, said he wanted to create a place worthy of that kind of healing. Dr. Sterling built this hospital because he was a good man, Marcus said carefully. Whatever happened in Kandahar, that was just people doing their jobs. Their jobs? Edgar shook his head. Son, I've seen your file. You've been working here for 18 months. 18 months of mopping floors and cleaning toilets in a hospital founded by the man whose life you saved, and his daughter just threw a mop at your feet. It's a good job. Lets me be close to my daughter. It's a waste. That's what it is. Marcus finally met his eyes, and now there was something dangerous there, something sharp beneath the surface. What I was doesn't matter anymore, Dr. Morrison. I can't operate. I can't heal people the way I used to, but I can keep this hospital clean. I can make sure the supplies are where they need to be when someone codes. I can teach my daughter that there's no shame in honest work, no matter what anyone says. He dropped the broken ceramic into his trash bag and returned to his cart. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have floors to mop. That night, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed in the small apartment he shared with Amara. The lights were off. Streetlight filtered through thin curtains, casting long shadows across the wall. He rolled up his sleeve and stared at the tattoo on his right forearm. A caduceus wrapped in the American flag. The serpents coiled around the staff, their heads meeting at the top. Below it, in simple block letters, "First, do no harm." The 28th Combat Support Hospital's unofficial motto. Every surgeon who served with them got the same tattoo. A brotherhood marked in ink. A promise they'd never break. He touched the faded lines with his trembling fingers. "I'm still here, Denise," he whispered to the empty room. "I'm still fighting. I just don't know what for anymore." His wife had been gone 3 years now. Lupus complications. She'd hidden her diagnosis while he was deployed, didn't want him distracted while he was saving lives overseas. When he finally came home, broken and trembling, she had 6 months left. She died holding his damaged hand. "Daddy?" Marcus quickly pulled down his sleeve. Amara stood in the doorway, her nightgown wrinkled, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Hey, baby girl, what are you doing up?" "I had a bad dream." She padded across the room and climbed onto the bed beside him. "About that lady at the hospital. She was yelling at me again." Marcus put his arm around her. "That lady doesn't matter. She's going through some things. Doesn't give her the right to be mean, but it explains it." "What kind of things?" "Her daddy died about 8 months ago. He was the one who started the hospital. I think she's trying really hard to prove she can run it as good as he did." Amara was quiet for a moment, processing this the way 9-year-olds do. "So she's sad and scared, and that makes her mean?" Marcus smiled despite everything. "Yeah, baby, something like that." "That's still not okay." "No, it's not." Amara snuggled closer. "Daddy, were you a doctor before?" His heart stopped. "What makes you ask that?" "Sometimes when I study my biology books, you know all the answers without looking. And the way you explained the heart to me last week, my teacher said I got things right that weren't even in our textbook." Marcus was silent for a long time. "I was in the army," he finally said. "A long time ago. I learned some medical stuff there." "Is that where you hurt your hand?" He looked down at her, this small, brilliant, beautiful child, who had her mother's eyes and his stubbornness. "Yeah, baby, that's where I hurt my hand." "Does it still hurt?" "Sometimes." She reached out and took his trembling hand in both of hers, holding it steady. "I'll be a doctor for both of us," she said. "I'll learn to do all the things you can't do anymore, and I'll make you proud." Something broke inside Marcus Williams then. Not cracked broke. The wall he'd built around his grief, around his shame, around all the years of hiding who he used to be. He pulled his daughter close and held her tight. His damaged hand pressed against her back. tears streaming down his face that he didn't try to hide. "You already make me proud," he whispered. "Every single day." Victoria Sterling stood in her father's office at 11 p.m., staring at the photograph on his bookshelf. The room hadn't changed since his death. She couldn't bring herself to move anything. His stethoscope still hung on the coat rack. His reading glasses still sat on the desk beside a stack of medical journals he'd never finish. The whole room smelled like him coffee and old books and the sandalwood cologne he'd worn for 40 years. The photograph showed her father 20 years younger, shaking hands with a black man in military dress uniform. They stood outside a VA hospital, both smiling. Her father's smile was genuine, grateful, the smile of a man who'd been given a second chance at life. She'd asked about the photo once when she was 15. Her father had only said, "A doctor saved my life once. Reminded me why I went into medicine in the first place." He never elaborated. She never pressed. Now he was gone, and she was left with a hospital that was bleeding money, a board that questioned her every decision, and a photograph she didn't understand. "Who were you?" she asked the man in the picture. "And why did my father keep you on his shelf for 20 years? The photograph didn't answer. Victoria turned away and walked to the window. The city stretched out below her, lights glittering like scattered diamonds. Somewhere out there, people were sick, dying, hoping that places like Meridian could save them. And here she was running a hospital she'd turned into a profit machine because she didn't know any other way to prove she was worthy. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. They want to discuss the Q3 numbers. She closed her eyes. The numbers were fine. They were always fine. She'd cut every program that didn't show immediate returns, fired every employee who couldn't justify their salary, squeezed every department until they ran on fumes and fear. The hospital was profitable. Her father would have hated what it had become. She thought about the janitor she'd humiliated that afternoon. The way he'd stood there silent, absorbing her cruelty without a word. The way his daughter had watched with tears in her eyes. Victoria had been cruel because she could be, because showing compassion felt like weakness, because her father had been kind and kind had gotten him nothing but a heart attack at 68 and a daughter who couldn't even fly home in time to say goodbye. She picked up the photograph again, studying the man in military uniform. Strong jaw, steady eyes. The kind of man who looked like he'd seen things that would break most people and kept standing anyway. "Whoever you were," she said, "I hope you had a better life than my father did. I hope saving him was worth it." She put the photograph back on the shelf and walked out of the office, turning off the lights behind her. The photograph sat in darkness, keeping its secrets. For now. 3 weeks passed. Marcus kept his head down. He cleaned floors, organized supplies, stayed invisible. Amara visited after school, doing her homework in the break room, while he worked her biology textbooks spread across the table beside the vending machine. Edgar Morrison watched from a distance, saying nothing, waiting. He'd told a few trusted colleagues about his suspicions, Dr. Patricia Hayes in surgery, Dr. James Chen in the ER, a couple of senior nurses who'd been around long enough to remember when hospitals were about healing instead of profit margins. The whispers spread quietly like smoke under a door. The janitor was a combat surgeon. 28th CSH, the unit from Kandahar. They called him the Resurrector. Could be anyone. Lots of people served. But look at how he moves. Look at how he organizes those supplies. Victoria heard the whispers. She dismissed them with a wave of her hand. Rumors, she told her assistant. Staff has too much free time. Find them something productive to do. But late at night, she found herself staring at her father's photograph again. The timeline nagged at her. Her father had been shot in Kandahar in 2004. He'd spent months recovering, then threw himself into building Meridian with an almost manic energy. He never spoke about what happened overseas, but he kept that photograph on his shelf for 2 decades. She ran the numbers in her head. If the surgeon who saved him was in his mid-30s, then he'd be in his mid-50s now. The janitor looked about that age. The build was similar. The military bearing was unmistakable, even hidden beneath that shapeless uniform. But it couldn't be. What kind of hero ends up mopping floors in the very hospital founded by the man he saved? Victoria shook off the thought. She had a hospital to run, a board to satisfy, a legacy to protect. She didn't have time for ghost stories. Oh, the crisis came on a Sunday afternoon. Victoria was in her office reviewing quarterly projections when her pager went off. 3 short bursts. Mass casualty alert. She grabbed her white coat and ran. The ER was chaos. A charter bus carrying a high school lacrosse team had collided with a semi-truck on I-95. 18 casualties, 6 critical, 2 in immediate need of surgery. And the worst news of all, Senator Morrison's grandson was one of the critical patients. Victoria found Edgar Morrison in the hallway, his face gray, his hands shaking. "Michael's in there," he said. "My grandson, 17 years old. He was sitting in the back of the bus when it—" His voice broke. "They're saying internal bleeding. His BP keeps dropping." "Where's Dr. Harrison?" "Stuck in traffic. 40 minutes out minimum." "Chen." "Not trauma certified." "Hayes." "Already in surgery with another patient." Victoria felt the walls closing in. Senator Morrison was on his way. The press was gathering outside, and a 17-year-old boy was bleeding to death with no one qualified to save him. She pushed through the doors into Trauma Bay 2. Michael Morrison lay on the table, unconscious, pale, his vitals deteriorating by the second. Nurses and residents swarmed around him, calling out numbers that Victoria knew were wrong, all wrong. BP 72, over 40 and dropping. He's not responding to fluids. We need to operate now or we're going to lose him. Victoria grabbed the nearest resident. What's the damage assessment? We think it's the spleen internal hemorrhage, but we can't confirm without opening him up, and there's no one here who... There's me. Victoria turned. Marcus Williams stood in the doorway, still wearing his janitor's uniform, still holding a mop he'd apparently dropped mid-stride. Get out, Victoria said. This is a restricted area. His spleen ruptured. Marcus walked past her, his eyes fixed on the monitors. That's why the BP keeps dropping. You can see it on the ultrasound there, the shadow in the left upper quadrant. He needs a splenectomy in the next 6 minutes or he's going to code. The room fell silent. Victoria stepped toward him, her voice low and dangerous. You're a janitor. You can't possibly... I was a trauma surgeon with the 28th Combat Support Hospital. His voice was steady despite the tremor in his hand. I've done this exact surgery in a tent while mortars fell outside. I've done it with failing equipment and no blood supply, and patients who should have been dead before they reached my table. Your father was one of them. Victoria's world tilted. What did you say? Henry Sterling, Kandahar Province, November 2004. He was volunteering at a refugee camp when militants attacked. 2 gunshot wounds, 1 to the abdomen, 1 to the chest. I operated on him for 4 hours in conditions you can't imagine. He lived because I refused to let him die. The monitor flatlined. He's coding, a nurse screamed. Marcus didn't hesitate. He pushed through the frozen staff, grabbed a surgical gown from the rack, and was issuing orders before anyone could stop him. You prep OR-2 now. You 4 units O negative and warm them. You... He pointed at a young resident who stood trembling by the crash cart. You're my hands. You do exactly what I say when I say it. No hesitation. Do you understand? The resident looked at Victoria. Everyone looked at Victoria. Senator Morrison's grandson was dying on the table. A janitor was claiming to be a war hero. And the clock was ticking down to 0. Victoria made her decision. Do it! The operating room erupted into controlled chaos. Marcus moved through it like a man who'd done this 1,000 times before because he had. His voice cut through the panic, steady and commanding, the voice of a surgeon who'd operated while bombs fell outside his tent. Get him on the table, now! Don't wait for the gurney transfer, lift him. 3 of you on my count. 1, 2, 3. They lifted. Michael Morrison's body was light, too light for a 17-year-old athlete. He'd lost too much blood already. "What's your name?" Marcus asked the young resident who'd been assigned as his hands. "Chen, James Chen." "You ever done a splenectomy, Dr. Chen?" "I've assisted on 3, never primary." "Today you're primary. I'm going to talk you through every single cut, every single clamp, every single stitch. You don't think. You don't hesitate. You just do exactly what I say. Can you handle that?" Chen's hands were shaking. He looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and saw something in those eyes that steadied him. This wasn't a janitor. This was someone who'd stared down death so many times they'd become old friends. "Yes, sir." "Good. Gown up. We don't have time for full scrub. Use the sanitizer and double glove. Move." Victoria stood by the door, frozen between her authority and her uncertainty. Part of her wanted to stop this madness. A janitor directing surgery. The liability was astronomical. If the boy died, if anything went wrong, her career was over. The hospital was over. But another part of her, the part that had watched her father save lives before profit margins consumed everything, that part recognized what she was seeing. This man knew what he was doing. "Scalpel ready," a nurse called out. Marcus positioned himself at Chen's right shoulder. His damaged hand gripped the surgical rail to control its tremor. His eyes never left the operating field. "Midline incision," he said. "Start 2 centimeters below the xiphoid process. You're going to cut straight down about 15 centimeters. Steady pressure. Don't rush it." Chen's hand hovered over Michael's abdomen. He took a breath. "Now, Dr. Chen." The scalpel touched skin. "Good. Keep going. Straight line. You're doing fine." Blood welled up immediately, dark and fast. Too fast. "Suction," Marcus commanded. "Keep that field clear. Chen, you're going to see a lot of blood when you open the peritoneum. Don't panic. That's what we're here to fix. Just keep cutting." The blade moved deeper. Layers of tissue parted beneath Chen's steady hands. "There," Marcus said. "Stop. You see that? The peritoneum. One more careful incision and we're in. Gentle now. You nick the bowel. We've got a whole new problem." Chen made the cut. Blood flooded the cavity. "Oh God," someone whispered. "Suction." Marcus's voice was sharp but controlled. "Get me better suction. And someone get another 4 units of O-negative warming. He's going to need it." The suction cleared enough of the blood to reveal the damage. Michael's spleen was ruptured, torn almost in half by the blunt force trauma of the crash. Blood poured from the wound like water from a broken pipe. "His BP is dropping," a nurse called out. 62/38. "It's going to drop more before it gets better," Marcus said. "That's normal. Stay focused. Chen, you see the splenic artery, that's our primary target. We clamp that, we stop the bleeding. Everything else is secondary." Chen's hands moved into the cavity, guided by Marcus's voice. "Retract there. More. Good. Now you're looking at the gastrosplenic ligament. You need to divide it to mobilize the spleen. Use the ligature. It'll seal the vessels as you cut." "I can't see the artery. There's too much blood." "It's there. Trust me. Follow the superior border of the pancreas. The artery runs just above it. Suction, get me more suction in that quadrant." The field cleared. Chen's eyes widened. "I see it." "Good. Now here's where it gets delicate. You're going to isolate the artery first, then the vein. Don't rush. One wrong move, and we're dealing with a hemorrhage we can't control." "His pressure's still dropping," the nurse warned. 54/30. "Stay with me, Dr. Chen. You're doing great. Isolate the artery. That's it. Now clamp it." "Good. You feel that the bleeding's already slowing." It was true. The flood of blood was becoming a trickle. "Vein next. Same technique. Careful around the pancreatic tail, you damage that, he's diabetic for life." Chen worked in silence, his breathing shallow, his focus absolute. Marcus talked him through every movement, every adjustment, every potential complication. "There's a bleeder at 7 o'clock. You see it. Small vessel, probably a short gastric. Clip it. Good. Now you can start mobilizing the spleen. Support it with your left hand. Don't let it drop, or you'll tear the remaining attachments. 10 minutes passed. 20. The spleen came free, damaged beyond saving, and Chen lifted it out of Michael's body with hands that had stopped shaking. "Specimen," he said, placing it in the basin a nurse held ready. "Now we check for bleeders," Marcus said. "Systematic sweep clockwise from the diaphragm. You miss one, he bleeds out in recovery." Chen moved carefully, methodically, his eyes scanning every surface of the surgical field. "There, 11 o'clock. You see that oozing? Got it." Chen applied a clip. "And there's one more near the splenic bed, deeper. Use your suction to expose it." The final bleeder was sealed. "BP stabilizing." The nurse called out, relief flooding her voice. 78/50 and climbing. "Good. Now we close. Layer by layer. Take your time, the hard part's over." Chen's hands moved through the closure with growing confidence. Peritoneum, fascia, subcutaneous tissue, skin. When the last suture was tied, he stepped back from the table, his surgical gown soaked with sweat and blood. "He's going to live," Chen said, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "He's going to live," Marcus confirmed. "Because you didn't panic. You trusted your hands and you listened. That's what surgeons do." The room erupted. Nurses cheered. Someone was crying. The anesthesiologist, a young woman who'd been silent through the entire procedure, slumped against the wall with relief. Edgar Morrison pushed through the doors, his face wet with tears. He'd been watching through the observation window, unable to breathe, unable to pray, unable to do anything but watch a janitor save his grandson's life. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "Thank you. I don't know how to... I can't..." Marcus shook his head. "Thank Dr. Chen. He did the surgery. You guided him, every step. I watched." Edgar gripped Marcus's arm. "I knew it. I knew from the first moment I saw you organizing those supplies. You're him. You're the resurrector." Marcus tried to pull away, but Edgar held firm. In the struggle, Marcus's surgical gown shifted. His sleeve rode up, exposing his forearm. And there it was, the tattoo. A caduceus wrapped in the American flag, the serpents coiled around the staff, their heads meeting at the top. Below it, in faded block letters, "First, do no harm." The room fell silent. Victoria stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the ink. "That's the 28th CSH insignia," Dr. Hayes said. She'd finished her surgery and come running when she heard the commotion. "That's the unit from Kandahar, the one they wrote about in Military Medicine Quarterly." "The Resurrector," Edgar whispered again. "It's really him." Victoria couldn't move, couldn't speak. She stared at the tattoo, at the faded flag, and the caduceus, at the words that had been her father's favorite motto. "First, do no harm." Her father had said those words every morning when he walked into the hospital. She'd thought he learned them in medical school. Now she understood he'd learned them from the man who saved his life. "You saved my father," she said. Her voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. "In Kandahar. That photograph in his office, the man in the uniform, that's you." Marcus pulled down his sleeve covering the tattoo. "It was a long time ago." "Why didn't you tell anyone? Why are you mopping floors when you could..." "Could what?" For the first time, there was an edge in Marcus's voice. "Could operate with this." He held up his trembling hand. "Could practice medicine without a license because mine expired when I couldn't pay the renewal fees. Could walk into any hospital in America and say, 'Hi, I used to be somebody. Please give me a job.'" Victoria flinched. "I have a daughter," Marcus continued. "She needs a roof over her head and food on the table. She needs to see her father get up every morning and go to work, even if that work is cleaning toilets. She needs to know that there's no shame in honest labor, even when people..." He stopped himself. "Even when people like me tell you there is." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Victoria looked around the operating room at the nurses who'd followed his commands without question at Dr. Chen, who'd just performed the surgery of his life at Edgar Morrison, who couldn't stop crying at the teenage boy on the table whose chest rose and fell with the steady rhythm of survival. And she looked at Marcus Williams, the janitor, the hero, the man her father had kept on his shelf for 20 years. "We need to talk," she said. "In my office. After you've cleaned up." She turned and walked out before he could see the tears streaming down her face. The post-op recovery unit was quiet. Michael Morrison slept peacefully, his vitals stable, his color slowly returning. Edgar sat by his bedside holding his grandson's hand, still processing what he'd witnessed. Dr. Chen stood at the foot of the bed writing notes in the chart, but his mind was elsewhere. "How did you stay so calm?" Marcus looked up from where he was collecting the surgical waste. Even after saving a life, he'd returned to his job. Someone had to clean the OR. "Excuse me." During the surgery, your hand was shaking the whole time, but your voice never wavered. You guided me through a splenectomy like you were teaching a cooking class. "How?" Marcus tied off the biohazard bag. "Practice." "That's not an answer." "You want the real answer?" "Fear is a luxury. When someone's dying on your table, you don't get to be scared. You don't get to doubt yourself. You just do the work. You focus on the next step, then the next one, then the next one, until either they're alive or they're not." Chen set down his pen. "What happened to you? How does someone like you end up mopping floors?" Chen had the grace to look embarrassed. "I got hurt," Marcus said simply. "Lost the use of my hand. Lost my wife. Lost my savings to medical bills. But I never lost my daughter, and that's what matters." He picked up the bag and headed for the door. "You did good in there, Dr. Chen. Better than good. You've got steady hands and you don't panic under pressure. Keep practicing. You'll be a great surgeon." "Will you teach me?" Marcus stopped his back to the young doctor. "I don't know what I'll be doing tomorrow. Might not be working here anymore. Hard to keep a janitorial job when the whole hospital knows your secret." "That's not what I asked." Marcus turned. Chen's face was earnest, determined, the face of someone who'd just discovered what he was capable of and wanted to learn more. "If they let me stay," Marcus said slowly. "Ask me again." He walked out into the corridor where Victoria was waiting. She'd changed out of her white coat. Without it, she looked younger, smaller, less like the CEO who'd thrown a mop at his feet, and more like the daughter who'd lost her father 8 months ago. "My office," she said. "Please." They walked in silence through the hospital. Nurses and doctors stopped to stare as they passed the janitor who'd saved a senator's grandson, walking beside the CEO who'd humiliated him for months. The whispers followed them like shadows. Victoria's office was on the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The furniture was modern, expensive, cold. But Marcus's eyes went immediately to the bookshelf behind her desk. The photograph. He recognized himself 20 years younger, shaking hands with Henry Sterling outside the VA hospital. They'd only met twice, once in Kandahar, once at the VA, but Henry had insisted on the photograph, had insisted on staying in touch. Marcus had disappeared instead, changed his number, moved 3 times. Buried himself so deep that no one could find him because he didn't want to be found. Because being found meant explaining. And explaining meant reliving. "Sit down," Victoria said. "Please." He sat. She remained standing, pacing by the window, her arms crossed over her chest. "I don't know where to start." "You don't have to start anywhere. I saved your father. That was a long time ago. It doesn't change anything." She spun around. "It changes everything. I've spent 4 months treating you like dirt. I threw a mop at your feet. I insulted your daughter's dreams. I told you," her voice cracked, "I told you that some people are born to heal and others are born to clean up after them. And the whole time you were the man my father called his guardian angel." Marcus said nothing. "He talked about you. Not often, not in detail, but enough. He said a surgeon saved his life under impossible conditions. Said that surgeon taught him what medicine was really about. Said he built this hospital because he wanted to be worthy of that sacrifice. She sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted. Why didn't you ever contact him? He looked for you. For years. Because I didn't want to be found. Because being a hero means people expect things from you, and I had nothing left to give. I came home broken. My wife was dying. My career was over. I spent 2 years just trying to learn how to live again. And you ended up here. I ended up a lot of places. This was just the latest. I took the job because it let me be near medicine without practicing it. Because Amara could visit me after school. Because your father... He stopped. Because my father what? Marcus looked at the photograph. Because when I was at my lowest, when I couldn't get out of bed, when I was drinking too much and praying for God to take me too, I found an article about him. About this hospital he was building. About his mission to provide care for people who couldn't afford it. And I thought, maybe some good came out of that night in Kandahar after all. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. He never stopped being grateful. He never stopped trying to find you. And She pressed her hands to her face. I've destroyed everything he built. I've turned this hospital into exactly what he didn't want it to be. You've done what you thought you had to do. I've done what was easy, what was safe. Cutting costs and firing people and treating everyone like numbers instead of humans, that's not leadership. That's cowardice. Marcus leaned forward. What do you want to do now? I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. She lowered her hands. Her makeup was ruined, her eyes red. She looked nothing like the CEO who'd commanded this hospital with an iron fist. All I know is that you saved a boy's life today because you were brave enough to step forward when everyone else was paralyzed. And you did it even after I humiliated you, even after I told your daughter she'd never be anything. Amara will be something, Marcus said quietly, with or without your approval. She's got her mother's heart and her father's stubbornness. She's going to change the world. I believe you. I saw her drawings. Those weren't the scribbles of a child playing pretend. Those were the studies of someone who actually understands what she's looking at. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. She's smarter than I ever was. Victoria stood and walked to the window. The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of orange and gold. I want to make this right. I want to be the kind of leader my father would have respected. But I don't know how. Start by asking the people who work for you. They've been afraid to speak up because you've made fear the foundation of this place. Change that, and you'll be surprised what they tell you. And what about you? What can I do for you? Marcus thought about it. For 18 months he'd asked nothing of anyone. He'd kept his head down, done his work, and tried to be invisible. But maybe it was time to ask for something. There are kids out there like Amara. Kids who dream of being doctors but can't afford to even think about medical school. Kids from neighborhoods where becoming a janitor is considered a good outcome. Your father wanted to help people who couldn't afford care. Maybe it's time to help people who want to provide that care but can't afford the education. Victoria turned. A scholarship program. More than that, a pathway, mentorship, shadowing opportunities, real training from real doctors. The kind of access that rich kids get automatically, but poor kids never see. And you would run it? I can't practice medicine. But I can teach. I can mentor. I can show kids like Amara that the path exists even if it's hard. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. My father would have loved that idea. He would have funded it himself. Then honor his memory. Make it happen. She nodded slowly, something shifting in her expression. Not just agreement, something deeper. A decision being made. A direction being chosen. I'm going to call an all-staff meeting tomorrow morning, she said. I'm going to tell them what happened today. And I'm going to tell them that things are going to change, starting with you. What about me? You're not a janitor anymore. Effective immediately, you're a consultant, medical training and safety advisor. We'll figure out the exact title later, but you're not cleaning another toilet in this hospital." Marcus shook his head. "I don't need a fancy title. I just need to be able to pay my rent and take care of my daughter. You'll have a salary that reflects what you're worth, what you've always been worth." Victoria's voice was firm now, decisive. "And Dr. Chen is going to shadow you. He asked if you would teach him. I'm making it official. He's a good kid, steady hands. He saved a senator's grandson because you believed in him, because you talked him through something he didn't think he could do." Victoria walked to her desk and picked up the photograph of her father and Marcus. "My father built this hospital because you taught him what healing really meant. Maybe it's time you taught the rest of us." Marcus looked at the photograph at the young man he used to be, confident and whole, shaking hands with a patient who would go on to build an empire. That man was gone. But maybe something remained. Maybe the broken pieces could still be useful even if they couldn't be put back together. "I'll think about it," he said. "Fair enough." Victoria set down the photograph. "But while you're thinking know this, I was wrong about you. I was wrong about everything. And I'm going to spend however long it takes to fix what I've broken, starting with an apology to your daughter." Marcus stood. His hand trembled, but his voice was steady. "Amara doesn't need your apology. She needs to see that people can change. That being wrong isn't the end, it's the beginning. Show her that, and you'll give her something more valuable than words." He walked to the door. "Mr. Williams." He turned. Victoria's face was wet with tears, but she was standing straighter now, some of the cold hardness melting away. "Thank you. For saving my father. For saving Michael. For showing me what I'd forgotten." Marcus nodded once, then walked out into the corridor. His phone buzzed. A text from Amara. "When are you coming home?" "I made spaghetti. It's probably terrible, but I tried." He typed back, "On my way. Save me some, even if it's terrible. I love you. I love you too, Daddy." He put the phone away and walked toward the elevator past the whispers and the stares and the questions that would come tomorrow. For the first time in years, he wasn't invisible. And for the first time in years, he wasn't sure that was a bad thing. The spaghetti was in fact terrible. Marcus chewed slowly, watching Amara's face across the small kitchen table. She was staring at him with that mixture of hope and anxiety that only a 9-year-old who'd just attempted to cook dinner could manage. "It's good," he said. "You're lying." "I'm not lying. It's creative." Amara poked at her own plate. "I put sugar in it instead of salt. I didn't read the labels." Marcus took another bite. The sweetness hit his tongue like a surprise attack, but he kept chewing. "Sugar spaghetti. That's innovation right there. Maybe you've invented a new cuisine." She giggled despite herself. "You're weird, Daddy." "I learned from the best." He reached across and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for making dinner. It means a lot that you tried. Mrs. Patterson from downstairs helped me with the stove. She said I shouldn't use it alone." Amara's face grew serious. "Daddy, something happened today, didn't it? You look different." Marcus set down his fork. His daughter was too perceptive, always had been. Denise used to say Amara could read people like books, could sense shifts in mood the way animals sensed earthquakes. Something did happen. "At the hospital." "Yes." Amara waited. She didn't push, didn't ask questions. She just waited. The way her mother used to wait when Marcus came home from deployments carrying weight he couldn't name. "There was an emergency," Marcus said carefully. "A young man was hurt very badly. The doctors who could have helped him weren't available." "So what happened?" "I helped." Amara's eyes widened. "You helped how?" "I guided another doctor through the surgery, told him what to do step by step. The young man survived." "But I thought you couldn't be a doctor anymore, because of your hand." "I can't operate, but I can still teach. I can still help other doctors do what I can't do myself." He paused, searching for the right words. It's like, imagine if you hurt your legs and couldn't run anymore. You could still coach other runners. You could still teach them how to be faster, stronger, better. You'd still be part of the race, just in a different way. Amara considered this, her brow furrowed with concentration. Did the mean lady see you help? Marcus almost smiled. The mean lady. That's what Amara had been calling Victoria since the incident in the research wing. She did. Was she still mean? No, she was surprised. And then she was sorry. She apologized for how she treated us. People don't just stop being mean, Daddy. That's what you always say. I say people can change if they want to badly enough. And I think she wants to. Marcus pushed his plate aside. Even love had its limits when it came to sugar spaghetti. She offered me a new job. A better job. I wouldn't be cleaning anymore. I'd be teaching. Amara's face lit up. Really? Like a real teacher. Like a consultant. Someone who helps doctors learn and helps the hospital run better. So you won't have to mop floors anymore. Probably not. Amara jumped up from her chair and threw her arms around him. Daddy, that's amazing. I knew you were special. I always knew it. Marcus held her tight, breathing in the smell of tomato sauce and sugar and childhood. I'm not special, baby girl. I'm just stubborn. That's what Mom used to say. Your mama was right about most things. Amara pulled back, her face suddenly serious. Does this mean I can go back to the hospital with you to study in the library? I don't know yet. We'll have to see how things work out. I hope so. I was reading about cardiac surgery before that lady yelled at me. Did you know they can actually stop someone's heart and restart it, like turning a computer off and on again? Marcus laughed, a real laugh, the kind he hadn't felt in months. I did know that, actually. Will you teach me more? Now that you're going to be a teacher. I'll teach you everything I know. Every single thing. Amara hugged him again. I'm going to be the best doctor ever, and when I am, I'm going to help people who can't afford it. Just like you helped people in the war. Something cracked in Marcus's chest. Pride, grief, hope, all mixed together in a combination he couldn't untangle. That's exactly what you should do, baby. Exactly what you should do. The all-staff meeting was held at 7 a.m. the following morning. Victoria stood at the podium in the hospital's main auditorium, facing 300 employees, who ranged from suspicious to hostile. Word had spread through the night the janitor was a war hero, the CEO had been humiliating him for months, something big was about to change. Marcus stood at the back of the room trying to be invisible. Old habits. I'm going to keep this short, Victoria began. Her voice was steady, but Marcus could see her hands gripping the podium. Yesterday, a patient came into our emergency room who would have died if not for the intervention of one of our staff members. His name is Marcus Williams. Most of you know him as the janitor who works the evening shift. Whispers rippled through the crowd. What most of you don't know, what I didn't know until yesterday, is that Marcus Williams is a decorated combat surgeon. He served with the 28th Combat Support Hospital in Afghanistan. He performed surgeries under conditions that would make most of us break down. He saved dozens of lives, including the life of my father, Henry Sterling, 20 years ago in Kandahar. The whispers became a murmur. People turned to look at Marcus. He kept his eyes forward, his face neutral. Yesterday, when a 17-year-old boy was dying and we had no one qualified to operate, Marcus stepped up. He guided Dr. James Chen through an emergency splenectomy that saved that boy's life. He did this despite the fact that I had spent months treating him like he was beneath my notice. Despite the fact that I insulted his daughter's dreams. Despite every reason he had to walk away and let us fail. Victoria's voice cracked. She paused, composing herself. I was wrong. I was wrong about Marcus Williams, and I was wrong about how I've been running this hospital. My father built Meridian to heal people, not to generate profit margins. He built it to be a place where everyone from the CEO to the janitor was valued as part of the healing process. I forgot that. I let fear and pride turn me into something he would have been ashamed of. She looked directly at Marcus now across the sea of faces. So I'm making changes. Effective immediately, Marcus Williams is no longer a janitor. He's our new medical training and safety consultant. He'll be working with our surgical staff, our residents, our nurses, anyone who wants to learn from someone who's saved more lives than most of us can count. Applause started somewhere in the middle of the room. It spread, growing louder until the whole auditorium was clapping. Some people stood. Others wiped their eyes. Marcus didn't move. He wasn't sure what to do with this moment, with all these eyes on him, with the weight of expectations he'd spent years avoiding. Victoria raised her hand for silence. But that's not all. Marcus had an idea yesterday, and I'm going to make it happen. We're launching a new program called Healing Futures. It will provide scholarships, mentorship, and training opportunities for young people from underprivileged backgrounds who want careers in medicine. Because the next Marcus Williams shouldn't have to mop floors to stay close to healing. The next Marcus Williams should have a clear path from where they are to where they dream of being. More applause, more standing, more tears. I know I have a lot to prove. I know many of you have lost trust in my leadership, but I'm asking for a chance to earn it back, starting today, starting now. She stepped away from the podium, and the meeting dissolved into chaos. People crowding around Marcus, shaking his hand, thanking him for things he'd done years ago, asking questions he didn't know how to answer. Through the crowd, he caught Victoria's eye. She nodded once, a small acknowledgement of everything that had changed between them. He nodded back. Dr. James Chen found Marcus in the cafeteria 2 hours later, staring at a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. "You're hiding," Chen said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I'm drinking coffee." "You haven't taken a sip in 20 minutes. I watched." Marcus finally looked up. "You watched me not drink coffee for 20 minutes. I was working up the courage to come over." Chen pulled out a notebook, worn dog-eared, filled with handwritten notes. "I've been carrying this since medical school. It's everything I never understood, everything I was too embarrassed to ask about. I figured someday I'd find someone who could explain it. And you think that's me? I think you talked me through a splenectomy while your hand was shaking so bad you could barely hold the surgical rail. I think you stayed calm when I was terrified. I think you saw things I missed and caught mistakes before I made them." Chen pushed the notebook across the table. "I think you're exactly who I've been looking for." Marcus picked up the notebook, flipping through pages of cramped handwriting and anatomical diagrams. The questions were good, detailed, specific, the kind of questions that showed Chen actually understood enough to know what he didn't understand. "You've got steady hands," Marcus said. "That's rare. Most people have to train for years to get hands that don't shake under pressure." "I've always been good with my hands. My mom wanted me to be a pianist." "Why'd you choose surgery?" Chen shrugged. "Because when I was 12, my little sister got hit by a car. The surgeon who saved her life came out of the OR covered in blood and told my parents she was going to be okay." I remember thinking that was the most powerful thing I'd ever seen. Not a superhero, not a soldier, just a tired man in scrubs who'd reached into my sister's body and kept her alive. "That's a good reason. What about you? Why'd you become a surgeon?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He'd been asked this question before in interviews and evaluations and late-night conversations with fellow soldiers. He'd always given some version of the acceptable answer: wanted to help people, wanted to serve his country, wanted to use his hands for good. But Chen had just given him the truth, so maybe he deserved the truth in return. "My mother died when I was 16. Brain aneurysm. She was cooking dinner, and then she was on the floor, and then she was gone. Just like that. The doctor said there was nothing anyone could have done, but I didn't believe them. I thought if someone had been paying attention, if someone had noticed the warning signs, if someone had been better." He stopped, surprised at himself. He hadn't talked about his mother in years. "You became a surgeon because you wanted to be the someone who noticed," Chen said quietly. "I became a surgeon because I was angry and scared, and I didn't want anyone else to feel what I felt standing in that hospital hallway. I wanted to be the person who came out covered in blood and said, "She's going to be okay." Did it work? Did it help? Marcus thought about all the lives he'd saved, all the families he'd comforted, all the impossible surgeries he'd pulled off through skill and stubbornness and refusal to quit. Sometimes, not always, medicine isn't magic. You do everything right and people still die. You make one mistake and someone lives anyway. The only thing you can control is showing up and doing the work. Is that what you're going to teach me? That's where we start. Everything else is just technique. Chen smiled the first real smile Marcus had seen from him. When do we begin? How about now? Marcus stood, leaving his untouched coffee on the table. Let's go find an OR that's not in use. I want to see how you tie sutures. The next few weeks were a blur of change. Marcus moved into a small office on the 3rd floor. Nothing fancy, just a desk and 2 chairs and a window that looked out over the parking garage. But it was his, and that was something. He spent his mornings in meetings with Victoria and her administrators, helping redesign training protocols and safety procedures. He spent his afternoons in the ORs, observing surgeries, offering quiet suggestions, catching potential problems before they became disasters. And he spent his evenings with Amara, who had been given special permission to use the hospital library after school. She was there now, spread out across a table with 3 textbooks open in front of her, writing furiously in her notebook. Marcus watched her from the doorway, marveling at her concentration. 9 years old, and already working at a middle school level. Maybe higher. "You're going to wear out that pencil," he said. Amara looked up grinning. "Dr. Hayes let me observe a surgery today. A real one. She said I could watch from the gallery as long as I promised not to throw up." "Did you throw up?" "No. It was amazing, Daddy. They were fixing this lady's heart valve, and Dr. Hayes explained everything while she worked. She said I asked better questions than some of her residents." Marcus sat down across from her. "What kind of questions?" "I asked why they chose that specific type of valve replacement instead of the other kind. And I asked about the risk of blood clots afterward. And I asked what would happen if—" She was off rattling through a list of questions that would have been impressive from a pre-med student, let alone a 4th grader. Marcus listened, nodding occasionally, correcting a misconception or adding context. This was what he'd wanted. Not fame, not recognition, not a fancy title this. His daughter learning, growing, dreaming with the full force of her brilliant mind. "Dr. Hayes said she'd mentor me," Amara said, finally pausing for breath. "Like officially. She said if I keep studying, she'll write me a recommendation for any program I want when I'm old enough." "That's incredible, baby girl. I'm so proud of you." She also said something else. Amara's voice grew quieter. "She said you were the best surgeon she ever saw. She said she reviewed the footage from Michael's surgery, and the way you guided Dr. Chen was like watching a master class. She said if your hand wasn't hurt, you'd be running this whole hospital." Marcus didn't know how to respond to that. "Is it true?" Amara asked. "Were you really that good?" "I was good at my job. A lot of people are good at their jobs." "That's not what I asked." He looked at his daughter, this small, fierce, unstoppable force of nature, and decided she deserved honesty. "Yes, I was that good. Maybe one of the best. But being good at surgery isn't the same as being a good person. I've known brilliant surgeons who were terrible human beings. I've known mediocre surgeons who were saints. What matters isn't how talented you are, it's what you do with that talent." "What did you do with yours?" "I tried to help people who couldn't help themselves. Soldiers who were blown up by bombs, civilians caught in crossfire, people who had no one else to fight for them." He paused. "And then I got hurt, and I couldn't do that anymore. So I had to find new ways to help. Smaller ways. Quieter ways. Like mopping floors. Like mopping floors. Like organizing supplies so nurses could find them during emergencies. like watching out for problems nobody else noticed. Amara was quiet for a moment, processing. And now, what way are you helping now? Now I'm teaching, showing younger doctors what I know. Building programs so kids like you have chances I didn't have. He reached across and squeezed her hand. And raising the most stubborn, brilliant, unstoppable daughter in the world. That's helping too. I'm not stubborn. Baby girl, you argued with your kindergarten teacher about the correct pronunciation of February for 3 days until she finally looked it up and admitted you were right. Amara grinned. That's not stubborn. That's thorough. That's your mother's daughter. They sat together in comfortable silence, the hospital humming around them, the textbooks waiting the future, stretching out ahead like a road they were building as they walked. Victoria found them there an hour later. She'd changed in the weeks since the surgery. The coldness had thawed. She smiled more, listened more, spent time on the floors talking to staff, instead of locked in her office reviewing numbers. People were starting to trust her again, slowly, cautiously, but the trust was growing. Am I interrupting? Amara looked up from her books. Marcus noticed she didn't flinch the way she used to when Victoria approached. Progress. I was just studying, Amara said. Dr. Hayes is going to quiz me on cardiac anatomy tomorrow. Dr. Hayes texted me that you're her best student, and you're not even officially a student yet. I'm practicing. Victoria smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. Can I borrow your father for a few minutes? There's something I need to show him. Amara looked at Marcus. He nodded and she went back to her books. They walked through the hospital together, past the nurses' stations and the waiting rooms, and the endless corridors that Marcus had mopped for 18 months. Where are we going? You'll see. Victoria led him to the east wing, to a section that had been under construction for weeks. Workers had been coming and going, but Marcus hadn't paid much attention. He'd assumed it was more administrative offices, more conference rooms, more spaces for the business side of medicine. She stopped in front of a door marked with a temporary paper sign, Healing Futures Program. Go ahead, she said. Open it. Marcus pushed through the door and stopped breathing. The space was transformed. What had been empty construction had become a learning center, desks arranged in clusters, computers at every station, anatomical models on display shelves, a full simulation lab visible through glass windows at the far end. And on the walls, photographs, faces of young people from every background, every neighborhood, every walk of life. Some in scrubs, some in white coats, some in hospital gowns receiving care. A visual representation of what medicine could be when it opened its doors to everyone. We're accepting applications next month, Victoria said. 20 students in the first cohort. Full scholarships, mentorship from our best doctors, hands-on training starting from day one. And I want you to lead it. Marcus couldn't speak. He walked slowly through the room, touching the desks, examining the equipment, reading the mission statement posted on the wall. Healing futures where potential becomes purpose. Every person deserves the chance to heal. Every healer deserves the chance to learn. We used the money my father left me, Victoria continued. His personal estate, not the hospital funds. He would have wanted it this way. He would have wanted his legacy to be something like this. Marcus finally found his voice. This is what you asked for, a pathway, a real chance for kids who never got one. He turned to face her. Why go this far? Victoria was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Because you were right. About everything. About my father, about this hospital, about what I'd forgotten. I spent 8 months trying to prove I was strong enough to fill his shoes, and all I did was destroy everything he built. His dream wasn't profit margins and efficiency metrics. His dream was healing. And healing isn't just about surgery, it's about giving people hope. She walked to the window, looking out at the city. My father never told me the full story of Kandahar. I knew someone saved his life, but I didn't know the details until I read his journals last week. He wrote about you, about the surgeon who operated for 4 hours in a tent, with failing generators, who refused to give up even when everyone else said it was hopeless, who stayed with him through recovery and then disappeared without a word. I didn't disappear. I just moved on. He wrote that you told him something that night, after the surgery when he was barely conscious. He wrote it down because he never wanted to forget it. What did I say? Victoria turned to face him. Her eyes were wet. You said your life belongs to someone now. Use it well. Marcus remembered. The tent had been hot, the generator stuttering Henry Sterling's vitals, finally stabilizing after hours of fighting. He'd been exhausted running on fumes and adrenaline, and he'd said those words without thinking. Something his mother used to say. Something she'd told him when he was 16 and angry, and didn't understand why she had to leave. He wrote that those words changed his life, Victoria continued. He said every decision he made after that night, he asked himself, am I using it well? Am I worthy of this second chance? And when he wasn't sure, he'd think of the surgeon who saved him and try to be someone that surgeon would be proud of. Marcus's vision blurred. He blinked, felt tears on his cheeks, didn't try to hide them. I didn't know. I never knew. How could you? You never gave him the chance to thank you. Victoria walked toward him, stopping a few feet away. But I can thank you now. For saving my father. For saving Michael. For saving me from becoming someone I don't want to be. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small metallic. She held it out to him. It was a key. This is yours, she said. The program, the space, everything. Build it the way you want. Hire whoever you need. Change whatever doesn't work. Just make it something worth believing in. Marcus took the key. It was small in his palm, insignificant looking, but it represented something bigger than metal and tumblers. It represented possibility, hope, a future he hadn't dared to imagine. There's one condition, Victoria added. What's that? Amara gets first acceptance. I already spoke to Dr. Hayes. She's going to formally mentor her through the junior track. Your daughter's going to be a doctor, Marcus. A great one. And she's going to do it with every advantage we can give her. Marcus closed his fingers around the key. I don't know how to thank you. Then don't. Just make it work. Make it something my father would have been proud of. I will. Victoria smiled that new smile, the one that had been emerging more and more over the past weeks. Then we have work to do. Staff meeting tomorrow at 8. We're announcing the program to the whole hospital, and you're giving the speech. I don't give speeches. You do now. You're not invisible anymore, Marcus. Time to get used to it. She walked toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Michael Morrison is being discharged tomorrow. He asked if he could meet you. The senator's already written a letter to the governor about what happened here. I think the publicity is going to be significant. I don't want publicity. I know. But sometimes the world needs to see its heroes, even the reluctant ones. It reminds people that goodness exists. She opened the door. Think about it. That's all I ask. She left. Marcus stood alone in the room that would become the foundation of something new. He looked at the photographs on the walls at the desks, waiting for students at the simulation lab where future doctors would learn to save lives. He thought about his mother, who died before she could see him become a surgeon. He thought about Denise, who'd believed in him even when he couldn't believe in himself. He thought about all the soldiers he'd saved and all the ones he couldn't. And he thought about Amara, his brilliant, stubborn, unstoppable daughter, who was going to change the world. He was still standing there when the sun set, still holding the key, still trying to believe that this was real. His phone buzzed. A text from Amara. Dr. Hayes says I scored 94% on the practice quiz. I missed one question about the aortic valve, but she explained it, and I'll get it right next time. He typed back. I never doubted you for a second. Come home soon. Okay, I'm making dinner again. Please don't put sugar in anything this time. No promises. Marcus laughed out loud, the sound echoing in the empty room. Then he pocketed the key, turned off the lights, and went home to his daughter. The speech was scheduled for 8 a.m., but Marcus arrived at 6. He stood alone in the auditorium, staring at the empty seats, his note cards crumpled in his trembling hand. He'd written and rewritten the speech a dozen times last night, crumpling page after page, until Amara finally took the pen away and told him to just speak from his heart. "That's not how speeches work," he'd said. "That's exactly how speeches work," she'd replied. "You're not giving a TED Talk, Daddy. You're telling people why this matters, and you already know why it matters." She was right, of course. She was always right. But knowing why something mattered and explaining it to 300 strangers were two very different things. The auditorium doors opened behind him. He turned, expecting Victoria, but it was Edgar Morrison who walked down the aisle, his grandson Michael beside him. Michael was thinner than Marcus remembered from the operating room. Of course he was. He'd been unconscious and bleeding out at the time, but there was color in his cheeks and strength in his step. He moved carefully, still healing, but he moved. "Dr. Williams," Edgar said. "I hope we're not intruding." "It's not doctor anymore, just Marcus." "With respect, sir, you'll always be doctor to me." Edgar stopped a few feet away, his hand on Michael's shoulder. "Michael wanted to meet you before the ceremony. He's been asking since he woke up in recovery." Marcus looked at the boy, 17 years old, tall and lean, with the build of an athlete, eyes that held something older than his years. Near-death experiences did that to people. Marcus had seen it in soldiers barely old enough to shave. "How are you feeling?" Marcus asked. Michael shrugged. "Like someone reached inside me and rearranged my organs, which I guess they did. Dr. Chen did the actual surgery. I just talked him through it." "That's not what Grandpa says. That's not what anyone says." Michael stepped forward, away from Edgar's protective hand. "They say you saved my life. They say no one else in that hospital could have done what you did." "People exaggerate. People tell the truth when it matters. And this matters." Michael's voice cracked slightly. "I was supposed to die that day. The doctors told my parents afterward, if they'd waited for the other surgeon, if they'd tried to stabilize me and transport me somewhere else, I wouldn't have made it. You gave me maybe 30 years, maybe 50. A whole life I wasn't supposed to have." Marcus didn't know what to say. He'd heard versions of this speech before from soldiers and their families, from patients who'd survived against the odds. It never got easier. The weight of gratitude was heavier than people realized. "What are you going to do with it?" Marcus finally asked. "With what?" "The 30 years, the 50 years, the whole life you weren't supposed to have. What are you going to do with it?" Michael was silent for a long moment. Behind him, Edgar watched with tears in his eyes. "I don't know yet," Michael admitted. "But I want it to mean something. I don't know, matter somehow. Before the accident, I was just thinking about college and lacrosse and parties. Normal stuff. But now everything looks different." "Yeah, everything looks different." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out the note cards he'd been clutching. He looked at them, all the careful words he'd written, all the polished phrases he'd practiced, and then he handed them to Michael. "Throw these away for me." "What, why?" "Because I don't need them anymore. You just reminded me what I'm supposed to say." Michael took the cards, confusion on his face. "What are you supposed to say?" "The truth. That's all anyone ever needs to hear." The auditorium filled slowly then, all at once. By 7:45, every seat was taken. Staff members lined the walls. Victoria sat in the front row with the board of directors, her face calm, but her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Dr. Chen sat nearby with a group of residents who'd heard about the surgery and wanted to learn from the man who'd guided it. Dr. Hayes was there with Amara beside her, the 9-year-old practically vibrating with excitement at being included in something so important. Edgar and Michael took seats near the back, trying to be inconspicuous. It didn't work. Word had spread about Senator Morrison's grandson, and people kept glancing their way, whispering, pointing. At exactly 8 o'clock, Victoria stood and walked to the podium. "Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I'll keep my introduction brief, because the person you're here to see doesn't like long introductions. A ripple of laughter. 3 weeks ago, Marcus Williams was a janitor in this hospital. Today, he's the director of our new Healing Futures program. The journey between those 2 points is one of the most remarkable stories I've ever witnessed, and I'm honored to be part of telling it. Please welcome Marcus Williams. Applause filled the room. Marcus walked to the podium on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. He gripped the wooden edges, steadied himself, and looked out at the sea of faces. His right hand trembled. He didn't try to hide it. "I had a speech prepared," he began. "I wrote it last night, revised it about 15 times, threw away most of it, and started over. My daughter finally told me to just speak from my heart. She's 9 years old, and she's smarter than I'll ever be, so I'm going to take her advice." He paused, gathering his thoughts. 22 years ago, I was a trauma surgeon in the United States Army. I served with the 28th Combat Support Hospital in Afghanistan, and I saw things that changed me forever. I operated on soldiers who'd been blown apart by IEDs. I held young men's hands while they died because there was nothing else I could do. I saved lives that should have been lost, and lost lives that should have been saved. That's what war is. That's what medicine is. You don't get to choose who lives and who dies. You just do the work and pray it's enough. The room was silent. 300 people held their breath. 15 years ago, I was injured in an explosion. Nerve damage to my right hand. The hand that had saved hundreds of people could barely hold a coffee cup. I was discharged, sent home, given medals I never wanted, and benefits that didn't cover my bills. My wife was dying of lupus. I couldn't hold her hand without shaking. I couldn't operate on anyone ever again. And I had a newborn daughter who needed a father who wasn't broken. He looked at Amara. She was crying, but she was also smiling. I'm not going to pretend I handled it well. I didn't. There were years when I drank too much. Years when I couldn't get out of bed. Years when I prayed every night for God to take me too, because the pain of being useless was worse than any physical wound I'd ever suffered. Victoria wiped her eyes. So did Edgar. So did half the room. But I had Amara, and Amara needed me to keep going, so I kept going. I took whatever jobs I could find, warehouse work, delivery driving, maintenance cleaning. Not because I was too proud to do those things, but because I needed to prove to myself that I could still contribute. That I still mattered. That my value as a person wasn't defined by what my hands could or couldn't do. He lifted his trembling right hand, held it up for everyone to see. This hand saved a lot of people. It can't save anyone anymore. But that doesn't mean I'm finished. It just means I have to find new ways to help, new ways to matter. And that's what the Healing Futures program is about. He lowered his hand and gripped the podium again. There are kids out there right now. Kids like my daughter, kids from neighborhoods where college is a fantasy and medical school is a fairy tale, who have the talent and the drive to be healers. They watch doctors on TV and dream about saving lives, but they can't even afford the application fees for pre-med programs. They work 2 jobs to help their parents make rent, and by the time they're 18, the dream is dead. Not because they weren't good enough, but because nobody gave them a chance. His voice grew stronger. That ends here. That ends now. The Healing Futures program is going to find those kids and give them the chance they deserve. Full scholarships, real mentorship, hands-on training from the best doctors in this hospital. We're not going to wait until they're 18 and already defeated. We're going to start when they're young, when the dream is still alive, and we're going to nurture it until it becomes reality. He looked at Michael Morrison in the back of the room. 3 weeks ago, a young man asked me what he should do with the life he wasn't supposed to have. I didn't have an answer for him then. I do now. The answer is, give someone else the chance you got. The chance to live. The chance to grow. The chance to become something that matters. His voice dropped, but it carried through the silent room. That's what Henry Sterling did when he built this hospital. He survived something he shouldn't have survived, and he decided to spend the rest of his life making sure others could survive too. That's what his daughter is doing by funding this program. And that's what I'm going to do with whatever time I have left. Not because I'm a hero, not because I'm special, but because it's the only thing that makes the pain worthwhile. He stepped back from the podium. Thank you. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then the applause started. Not polite measured applause, but something raw and overwhelming. A wave of sound that crashed over Marcus and left him struggling to breathe. People stood. People cheered. Someone was sobbing loudly in the middle of the room. Doctor. Chen was on his feet, clapping so hard his hands had to be hurting. And through it all, Marcus saw only one face, Amara standing on her chair, so she could see over the adults. Tears streaming down her cheeks, mouthing words he couldn't hear, but understood perfectly. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby. The reception afterward was a blur of handshakes and congratulations and business cards pressed into his palm. Marcus smiled and nodded and said thank you until his face hurt, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the 20 slots in the first cohort. 20 kids who would get the chance he was describing. 20 wasn't enough. There were thousands of kids out there who deserved this opportunity, but it was a start. Victoria appeared at his elbow, rescuing him from a pharmaceutical rep who wanted to discuss sponsorship opportunities. You're overwhelmed, she said quietly. That obvious? Only to someone who's been overwhelmed herself. She steered him toward a quiet corner. You need a minute. Take it. Everyone will still be here when you're ready. I'm fine. You're lying, but I appreciate the effort. She handed him a bottle of water. Drink this, breathe, and then come back when you can feel your face again. Marcus took the water. Thank you for all of this, for believing in me when you had no reason to. I had every reason. I just couldn't see it through all the walls I'd built. Victoria's expression softened. My father kept a journal. I found it last week in his desk. The last entry was written the day before he died. Do you want to know what it said? What? It said, Today I finally feel like I've earned my second chance. The hospital is doing what I always dreamed it would do. Victoria is ready to carry on even if she doesn't know it yet. And somewhere out there, the surgeon who saved me is living his own life, hopefully knowing that his gift wasn't wasted. I wish I could find him. I wish I could tell him that everything I've built I built because of him. But maybe it's better this way. Maybe heroes are meant to be remembered, not found. Marcus's vision blurred. He was wrong, Victoria continued. Heroes are meant to be found. They're meant to be celebrated. And they're meant to keep doing the work even when it hurts. That's what you're doing. That's what we're going to do together. She squeezed his arm. Now drink your water and get back out there. You've got a program to launch. 2 months later, the first cohort of the Healing Futures program began their training. 20 students ranging in age from 12 to 17 gathered in the learning center Marcus had walked through that first night. They came from every corner of the city, from housing projects and immigrant neighborhoods and foster homes and single-parent households. Some had never been inside a hospital before, except as patients. Others had been in hospitals too many times, watching family members suffer through illnesses that better care could have prevented. Marcus stood at the front of the room, looking at their faces, nervous, hopeful, terrified, determined. He remembered feeling exactly the same way on his first day of medical school 30 years ago. Welcome to Healing Futures, he said. My name is Marcus Williams. I used to be a surgeon. Now I'm something else, something I'm still figuring out. But I can tell you this, over the next several years, I'm going to teach you everything I know about medicine. And more importantly, I'm going to teach you everything I know about being a healer. A hand shot up. A girl in the front row, maybe 13, with braids and glasses and eyes that missed nothing. Yes. What's the difference? The difference between what? Between medicine and healing. You said them like they're different things. Marcus smiled. This one was going to keep him on his toes. Medicine is a science. It's techniques and procedures and protocols. You can learn it from textbooks and practice it on mannequins. It's important, it's essential, but it's not enough. He paused. Healing is an art. It's knowing when to push and when to step back. It's understanding that the person on your table isn't just a collection of symptoms. They're someone's mother, someone's father, someone's child. They have fears and hopes and a life outside this hospital that matters as much as what's happening inside. Healing means treating the whole person, not just the disease. The girl nodded slowly, processing. My grandma died last year, she said. Cancer. The doctors were really smart, but they never looked at her when they talked. They just looked at the charts. She said she felt like a number, not a person. What's your name? Destiny. Destiny Washington. Destiny, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Your grandma deserved better than that. Every patient deserves better than that. And by the time you finish this program, you're going to know how to give them better. Another hand went up. A boy near the back, tall and gangly, with the nervous energy of someone who wasn't used to being called on. Yes. Are we really going to do surgeries like on actual people? Not tomorrow, but eventually, yes. You're going to observe surgeries. You're going to assist on procedures. And when you're ready, when you've put in the work and proven you can handle the responsibility, you're going to participate in ways that matter. Marcus walked toward the back of the room. What's your name? Jalen. Jalen Cooper. Jalen, let me ask you something. Why are you here? The boy shifted uncomfortably. My mom applied for me. She said it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. That's why your mom wanted you here. Why do you want to be here? Silence. The other students turned to look at Jalen. He seemed to shrink under the attention. I don't know, he admitted. I mean, I think medicine is cool. But I'm not sure I'm smart enough for all this. Stand up. Jalen stood looking like he wanted to disappear. You see this hand? Marcus held up his trembling right hand. This hand used to perform surgeries that saved lives. Now it can barely tie my shoes. Want to know what I learned from that? What? Being smart isn't what makes you a good doctor. Being determined is. I've known brilliant surgeons who crumbled under pressure. I've known average students who became extraordinary healers because they refused to give up. Marcus locked eyes with Jalen. You don't have to be the smartest person in this room. You just have to be the most stubborn. Can you do that? Something shifted in Jalen's expression. The nervousness didn't disappear, but something else appeared alongside it. Something like resolve. Yeah, I can do that. Good. Sit down. The session continued for 2 more hours. Marcus covered the basics, program structure, expectations, schedules, but he kept coming back to the deeper questions. Why did they want to be healers? What did they hope to accomplish? Who were they doing this for? By the end, he knew all 20 names. He knew their stories, their fears, their dreams. He knew Destiny wanted to be an oncologist because of her grandmother. He knew Jalen's father had died of a heart attack when Jalen was 7, and no one had explained what happened until years later. He knew a girl named Maria had translated for her non-English speaking parents in emergency rooms since she was 8 years old and wanted to become a doctor so other kids wouldn't have to carry that burden. These were his students now, his responsibility, his legacy. After the session ended, after the students filed out with their orientation packets and their excited chatter, Marcus sat alone in the empty room. His hand was trembling badly now. The stress of the day had aggravated the nerve damage, and the pain was creeping up his forearm in familiar waves. The door opened. Amara slipped through her backpack, slung over one shoulder, her face bright with curiosity. How did it go? Better than I expected, worse than I hoped. That doesn't make sense, Daddy. It does, if you've been doing this long enough. He stretched his fingers, trying to ease the cramping. They're good kids, smart kids, but they've got so many walls up, so many reasons not to trust this. Half of them think they're going to wash out in the first month. The other half think this is too good to be true and it's going to be taken away. Amara sat down beside him. Then show them it's real. Show them you're not going anywhere. That's simple, huh? That's simple. She reached over and took his trembling hand in both of hers, holding it steady the way she always did. You showed me, Daddy. You showed me every single day. That's why I believed in you even when things were really hard. Because you never stopped showing up. Marcus looked at his daughter, this remarkable, impossible gift of a person, and felt his eyes sting. When did you get so wise? I learned from watching you. I thought I learned from watching your mother. Maybe wisdom is just something that gets passed around. She grinned. Like that good spaghetti recipe I keep trying to get right. Marcus laughed despite himself. Please tell me you're not making dinner tonight. Dr. Hayes is taking me for pizza. She said we need to discuss my cardiovascular module project. Amara's grin widened. I think she's just tired of your cooking. My cooking is fine. Your cooking is survival food, Daddy. There's a difference. Before Marcus could defend himself, his phone buzzed. A text from Victoria board meeting tomorrow at 9. They want to discuss expanding the program. Apparently, the senator has friends who want to donate. He typed back, already we just started. Success attracts attention. Get used to it. Marcus pocketed his phone and stood his knees protesting the movement. Come on, he said to Amara. Let's go interrupt your pizza date so I can embarrass you in front of Dr. Hayes. Please don't. I'm definitely going to ask if you've told her about the sugar spaghetti incident. I hate you. No, you don't. No, I don't. She grabbed his hand again, pulling him toward the door. But I reserve the right to pretend I do when you're being embarrassing. They walked out of the learning center together, past the photographs on the walls, past the simulation lab, past the dreams that were just beginning to take shape. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Senator Morrison made good on his promise. His friends in Washington wrote checks that made Victoria's eyes widen. The program expanded from 20 students to 35. Corporate sponsors came calling, offering equipment donations and internship pipelines. Medical schools reached out about guaranteed admission spots for program graduates. Marcus found himself in meetings he didn't understand, discussing budgets and partnerships and strategic visions. He nodded in the right places, deferred to Victoria on the business questions, and focused on the only thing that mattered to him, the students. Every morning he arrived at the learning center before anyone else. He reviewed lesson plans, prepared case studies, organized the simulation equipment. Then the students arrived, and the real work began. Destiny Washington turned out to be exactly as sharp as Marcus had suspected. She absorbed information like a sponge, and asked questions that made even the attending physicians think twice. Dr. Hayes took her under her wing, and within a month, Destiny was observing cardiac surgeries from the gallery, taking notes with an intensity that impressed everyone who saw her. Jalen Cooper struggled at first. The academic material didn't come easily to him, and he failed his first 2 assessments badly enough that Marcus had to talk him out of quitting. I told you I wasn't smart enough. Jalen said, his eyes red, his voice cracking. I'm wasting everyone's time. You're not wasting anyone's time. You're struggling, and struggling is part of learning. The other kids aren't struggling like I am. The other kids have different strengths and different weaknesses. Destiny memorizes facts like a machine, but have you seen her in the simulation lab? She freezes when things get chaotic. Maria knows 3 languages, but can't draw an anatomical diagram to save her life. Everyone has gaps. Marcus leaned forward. What matters is what you do about them. What can I do? I study for hours and I still can't remember everything. Then stop trying to remember everything. Start trying to understand instead. Marcus pulled out a notepad and drew a rough diagram of the heart. Tell me what you see. A heart. 4 chambers. Valves. Blood flow. Don't tell me what you've memorized. Tell me what you see. Jalen stared at the diagram for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. It's a pump, he said slowly. Like the pump my uncle uses on his truck. Blood goes in, one side gets pushed through to the other side, goes out to the body, comes back. Exactly. Now, forget all the fancy names for a minute. If the pump gets clogged, what happens? The flow backs up, pressure builds, things start to break. And if you're a doctor, and you see a clog, what do? Find the clog, clear it, fix whatever broke. That's medicine, Jalen. Everything else is just details. You understand systems. I've watched you in the simulation lab. When things get chaotic, you're the one who stays calm and figures out the flow. Build on that. Use it. The transformation wasn't instant, but it was real. By the end of the second month, Jalen's test scores had climbed from failing to passing. By the end of the third month, he was tutoring other students in the simulation exercises. But not every story had a happy ending. Marcus got the call on a Thursday afternoon. Mr. Williams, this is Mrs. Patterson from Jefferson Middle School. I'm calling about Maria Gonzalez. There's been a situation. His stomach dropped. What kind of situation? Her family was taken into custody this morning by ICE. Maria was at school when it happened. She's here with me now, but she's not in good shape. Marcus was out of his office and in his car within minutes. The drive to Jefferson Middle School took 15 minutes. The wait in the principal's office took another 10. When they finally let him see Maria, his heart shattered. She was sitting in a plastic chair in the guidance counselor's office, her eyes swollen from crying, her hands shaking as she held a crumpled tissue. She looked up when Marcus entered, and the hope that flashed across her face was almost worse than the despair that followed. "They took my parents," she whispered. "They took them, and I don't know where they are, and no one will tell me anything, and I—" She couldn't finish. The sobs took over. Marcus knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Maria, listen to me. We're going to figure this out. I'm going to make some calls, and we're going to find out where your parents are, and we're going to get you help. Do you understand? I can't go back to the program. I have to find them. I have to. The program isn't going anywhere, and neither are you." His voice was firm, steady, the voice he used when patients were panicking. "Right now, the most important thing is making sure you're safe and that we know what's happening. Everything else comes after." He spent the next 6 hours on the phone. He called Victoria, who connected him with the hospital's legal team. He called Edgar Morrison, who called his contacts in the Senate. He called immigration lawyers and advocacy groups and anyone else he could think of. By midnight, they had answers. Maria's parents were being held at a detention facility in Texas, awaiting deportation hearings. Maria herself, born in the United States, was technically safe, but she had nowhere to go. Her only relatives were back in Mexico, people she'd never met. Marcus made a decision without consulting anyone. "She's staying with me." Victoria, still on the phone at 1 a.m., was silent for a moment. "Marcus, that's a huge responsibility. Emergency foster care requires background checks, home inspections." "Then start the process. But tonight she's sleeping in my guest room. I'm not letting a 14-year-old girl spend the night in some government facility because bureaucracy moves slow. I'll make some calls. But Marcus, this could complicate your position with the program. If anyone thinks you're playing favorites, then let them think it. That girl has been through hell, and she needs someone to show up for her. That's what healers do. That's what this whole program is supposed to be about." Victoria was quiet for another long moment. "I'll have the paperwork started first thing in the morning. And Marcus, yeah, you're a good man. I'm glad you found your way here." She hung up. Marcus turned off the phone and walked to the guest room where Maria was finally sleeping, exhausted from crying. Amara had given up her bed to make the room more welcoming, and she was now camped out on the couch, watching the door like a guard dog. "Is she going to be okay?" Amara whispered. "I don't know, but we're going to do everything we can to help her." "Can I help too?" "You already are. Just by being here. Just by showing her she's not alone." Amara nodded solemnly. Then she patted the couch beside her. "Sit down, Daddy. You look really tired." He sat. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, the way she used to when she was little and scared of thunderstorms. "Daddy." "Yeah, baby. I'm proud of you. Mom would be proud too." Marcus closed his eyes. The weight of the day pressed down on him. The students, the meetings, Maria's shattered life. The impossible task of trying to help everyone who needed help. But his daughter was beside him. And somewhere in the guest room, a girl who'd lost everything was finally sleeping peacefully. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all any of them could do. Show up, keep going, refuse to quit. That was what healers did. The immigration hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in March. Marcus drove through the night to reach the detention facility in Texas. Maria beside him in the passenger seat, clutching a folder of documents that Victoria's legal team had assembled. Letters of support from senators, testimony from teachers, a formal offer of permanent foster care signed by Marcus himself. They hadn't spoken much during the drive. There wasn't much to say. Maria's parents had been in detention for 3 weeks, and every day that passed without resolution felt like another brick added to the wall between them. What if it doesn't work? Maria finally asked as the sun rose over the flat Texas horizon. What if they send them back anyway? Marcus kept his eyes on the road. Then we keep fighting. We appeal. We find new lawyers. We don't stop until we've exhausted every option. That could take years. It could. Are you willing to wait that long? Maria was quiet for a moment. They waited their whole lives for me to have a better future. The least I can do is wait for them. That's the right answer. It doesn't feel like the right answer. It feels like the only answer. Marcus glanced at her. In the 3 weeks since her parents' arrest, Maria had aged in ways that had nothing to do with time. The brightness in her eyes had dimmed. The quick smile that used to flash across her face had disappeared. She was still the same brilliant, determined girl who wanted to help families like hers, but now that determination had an edge to it, a hardness born from pain. "Can I tell you something?" Marcus said. "Sure." "When I lost my wife, I thought my life was over. I had a newborn daughter and a broken hand and no idea how to keep going. For a long time, I didn't want to keep going. I just wanted the pain to stop." Maria turned to look at him. "What changed?" Amara smiled at me. She was maybe 3 months old, and she looked up at me with these big eyes and smiled like I was the most important person in the world. And I realized that even though I'd lost almost everything, I hadn't lost her. And as long as I had her, I had a reason to keep fighting. So you're saying I need to find my reason. I'm saying you already have one. Your parents sacrificed everything so you could have opportunities they never had. The best way to honor that sacrifice is to become the person they believed you could be, whether they're here to see it or not. Maria wiped her eyes. That's a lot of pressure. It's not pressure. It's purpose. There's a difference. The hearing room was small, fluorescent lit, and filled with the kind of tension that made breathing difficult. Maria's parents sat at a table in the front, wearing matching orange jumpsuits that seemed designed to strip away their dignity. Her mother, Elena, was thin and pale from weeks of detention. Her father, Roberto, had aged 10 years. In 3 weeks, his shoulders hunched, his eyes hollow. When Maria walked in, Elena's composure shattered. She pressed her hand against the glass partition that separated them, tears streaming down her face, saying her daughter's name over and over like a prayer. Maria pressed her own hand against the glass. "I'm here, Mama. I'm here." Marcus stood back, watching his heart breaking in ways he hadn't expected. He'd seen plenty of suffering in his life, operating rooms and battlefields and hospital corridors where families received the worst news imaginable. But there was something uniquely cruel about this moment, about a family separated not by disease or war, but by policy, by paperwork, by systems designed to treat human beings as problems to be solved. The judge entered. The hearing began. For the next 2 hours, lawyers argued and documents were presented and testimony was given. Marcus sat in the gallery, hands clasped, watching Maria's face as she listened to strangers debate whether her family deserved to exist in the country where she'd been born. Victoria's legal team was good. They presented evidence of Roberto's 20 years of tax payments, Elena's volunteer work at the local church, Maria's academic achievements, and her acceptance into the Healing Futures program. They brought letters from neighbors and teachers and community leaders, all testifying to the Gonzalez family's value to their community. The opposing lawyer was methodical, citing statutes and precedents, arguing that the law was the law and exceptions couldn't be made regardless of individual circumstances. When it was Maria's turn to speak, she stood with a steadiness that belied her 14 years. "Your Honor, I was born in this country. I've never lived anywhere else. My parents brought me here when I was 6 months old because they wanted me to have opportunities they never had. They worked 2 jobs each, sometimes 3, to pay for my education. They learned English so they could help me with my homework. They did everything right, everything the system asked of them, and now they're being treated like criminals." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "I'm in a program right now that's teaching me to be a doctor. My dream is to help families like mine, families who can't afford health care, who don't speak the language, who fall through the cracks of a system that's supposed to protect them. I want to spend my life making things better for people who have nowhere else to turn. But I can't do that if I lose my parents. They're my foundation. They're everything I have." She looked directly at the judge. "I'm not asking you to break the law. I'm asking you to see my parents as human beings, as people who made mistakes decades ago because they were desperate and who have spent every day since then trying to make up for it. I'm asking you to give them a chance to watch their daughter become something. That's all they've ever wanted. That's all any parent wants." The judge was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. "The court will take a brief recess to consider the testimony presented. We will reconvene in 30 minutes. Those 30 minutes felt like 30 hours. Marcus found Maria in the hallway, sitting on a bench with her head in her hands. He sat beside her, not speaking, just present. Sometimes that was all you could offer: your presence, your solidarity, your refusal to let someone face the darkness alone. "Whatever happens," Maria said without looking up, "thank you for everything. For taking me in, for driving all night, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Don't thank me yet. We don't know how this ends. I know. But whatever happens, I needed you to know that you've already given me more than I can ever repay. You can repay me by becoming the doctor you're meant to be. That's all I want." The bailiff appeared in the doorway. "Court is reconvening." They walked back into the hearing room together. The judge took his seat. The room held its breath. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence presented, this court finds that the respondents Roberto and Elena Gonzalez have demonstrated significant ties to their community and have made meaningful contributions during their time in this country. The court notes the exceptional circumstances of their daughter's situation and the potential impact of deportation on her future. Maria gripped Marcus's hand so tightly he felt the bones shift. Therefore, this court grants a stay of deportation pending further review of the respondent's case. They will be released into the custody of their attorney with conditions including regular check-ins and travel restrictions. A full hearing on their status will be scheduled for 6 months from today. Elena collapsed against Roberto, sobbing. Maria stood frozen, unable to process what she'd heard. "It's not over," Marcus said quietly. "But it's not over in the right direction." Maria turned and hugged him fiercely. "Thank you! Thank you! Thank you! Thank you!" "Don't thank me. Thank your parents for raising someone worth fighting for." 3 hours later, Roberto and Elena Gonzalez walked out of the detention facility in their own clothes, blinking in the Texas sunlight like survivors emerging from underground. Maria ran to them, and the 3 of them stood in the parking lot, holding each other, crying, speaking in rapid Spanish that Marcus couldn't follow. He stayed by the car, giving them space, watching the family reunite with a mixture of joy and grief. Joy, because they were together again. Grief, because his own family would never have this moment. Denise was gone. His mother was gone. The only family he had left was a 9-year-old girl who was waiting for him back home. But maybe that was okay. Maybe family wasn't just about blood. Maybe it was about the people you chose to fight for and the people who chose to fight for you. Roberto approached him, hand extended. "Mr. Williams, my daughter told me what you did, what you've been doing for her." Marcus shook his hand. "Maria's an exceptional young woman. She would have found her way with or without me." "Perhaps, but you made sure she didn't have to try." Roberto's eyes were wet. "In my country, we have a saying, a person who saves one life saves the whole world. You saved my family. You saved our world. I'm just glad I could help." "You did more than help. You showed my daughter that there are still good people. After everything she's been through, she needed to see that. We all needed to see that." Elena joined them, taking Marcus's hands in both of hers. Her English was halting, but her meaning was clear. "Our home is your home. Always. You understand, always." Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. They drove back to the city together. All four of them crowded into Marcus's car. Maria wedged between her parents in the back seat, like she was afraid to let them out of her sight. The conversation was a mixture of English and Spanish tears and laughter, questions about the past 3 weeks, and plans for the uncertain future. By the time they reached the city, it was after midnight. Marcus dropped the family at the apartment Roberto and Elena had lived in before the arrest. Their neighbors had kept it safe for them, paying the rent from a community fund that had been collected in their absence. Maria hugged him one last time before going inside. "I'm going to make you proud," she said. "I'm going to become the best doctor you've ever seen." "I know you will. Now go be with your family. You've earned it." He drove home alone through empty streets, exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with the miles. When he finally walked through his apartment door, he found Amara asleep on the couch, a textbook open on her chest, a note in her handwriting taped to the lamp. "Daddy, Dr. Hayes says I passed my advanced anatomy exam. Top score in the junior cohort. She says I'm ready for the simulation lab. Wake me up when you get home so I can tell you about it. I love you. A." Marcus read the note 3 times. Then he sat down in the chair across from the couch and watched his daughter sleep. She was 10 now. In a few years she'd be a teenager. In a few more she'd be in college, medical school, residency, her own career, her own life, her own family. He wouldn't be there for all of it. Time moved too fast, and he was already feeling the weight of years in his bones. But he'd be there for as much as he could. And when he couldn't be there anymore, she'd carry the pieces of him forward, the lessons he'd taught her, the values he'd tried to instill, the love that connected them across every distance and every obstacle. That was what legacy meant. Not buildings or programs or plaques on walls. Legacy was the echo of your life in the lives of others. It was the way you changed people without realizing it, the way you shaped futures you would never see. Marcus closed his eyes and slept in the chair, his daughter's breathing the only sound in the quiet apartment. 5 years passed. The Healing Futures program grew beyond anything Marcus had imagined. What started with 20 students in a single learning center became a network spanning 12 cities, serving over 1,000 young people from underserved communities. Corporate sponsors lined up to attach their names to it. Medical schools created dedicated admission tracks for program graduates. The model was studied, replicated, celebrated. Marcus watched it happen from the periphery, still teaching, still mentoring, still showing up every day to do the work that mattered. He'd turned down 3 offers to become the program's national director, preferring to stay in the trenches where he could actually touch lives rather than manage spreadsheets. Victoria had become a different person entirely. She'd stepped back from day-to-day hospital operations to focus on the foundation work, channeling her considerable talents into expanding access to healthcare for communities that had been forgotten by the system. She'd remarried a pediatrician named Thomas, who shared her passion for service, and they'd adopted 2 children from the foster system. "My father would have loved this," she told Marcus one evening, standing in the lobby of the new Healing Futures headquarters that bore Henry Sterling's name. All of it. The program, the partnerships, the kids. He would have loved seeing his dream actually become something. "He's seeing it," Marcus said. "Wherever he is, he's seeing it." "You believe that?" "I have to believe something. Otherwise, what's the point?" Dr. James Chen had become one of the hospital's most respected trauma surgeons. He'd published papers trained residents saved countless lives. But he still called Marcus every time he faced a case that seemed impossible, still trusted the voice in his ear more than his own instincts. "You made me who I am," Chen said during his wedding toast, raising a glass to Marcus in the crowd. "Everything I've accomplished started with you believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. That's what teachers do. That's what healers do. And Marcus Williams is the greatest healer I've ever known." The students from that first cohort were scattered across the country, now pursuing their dreams. Destiny Washington was in her second year of medical school at Johns Hopkins, already publishing research on oncology treatment protocols. Jalen Cooper had surprised everyone by pursuing emergency medicine, inspired by the chaos of the simulation lab, where he'd first discovered his gifts. He was a paramedic now, working the same streets where he'd grown up, saving lives that might otherwise have been lost. And Maria Gonzalez had just been accepted to Harvard Medical School. She called Marcus the moment she got the news. Her voice so loud, he had to hold the phone away from his ear. "I got in, Marcus. I got in full scholarship, everything covered. I'm going to Harvard. I never doubted you for a second. I doubted me. Every single day I doubted me. But you kept telling me I could do it, and eventually I started believing you. That's not me. That's you. I just pointed you in the right direction." "You did more than that. You saved my family. You gave me a home when I had nowhere else to go. You showed me what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself." Her voice cracked. "My parents are throwing a party this weekend. They want you to come. They're going to make tamales and there's going to be music, and my dad's probably going to cry and embarrass everyone. Please say you'll come. I wouldn't miss it." The party was everything Maria had promised. Loud, chaotic, overflowing with food and family, and the kind of joy that only comes from surviving impossible odds together. Roberto did cry multiple times, while Elena bustled around the crowded apartment, making sure everyone had enough to eat. Marcus sat in the corner, watching his right hand resting on his knee. The tremor was worse now. Age and nerve damage had combined to make even simple tasks difficult. He couldn't write anymore without his hand cramping. He couldn't hold a coffee cup without spilling. But he could still listen. He could still teach. He could still show up. Amara appeared beside him, holding a plate loaded with tamales. She was 14 now, tall and gangly, caught in that awkward space between childhood and adulthood. Dr. Hayes had formally accepted her into the hospital's junior residency track, the youngest student ever admitted to the program. "You okay, Daddy? You look tired." "I'm always tired. That's what happens when you get old." "You're not old. You're experienced." "Nice spin. You get that from your mother." Amara smiled. It was Denise's smile exactly, and it still took Marcus's breath away every time he saw it. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you regret it? Any of it? The army, the surgery, the hospital, all of it?" Marcus considered the question. He'd asked himself the same thing countless times over the years, lying awake at night, wondering if he'd made the right choices. "I regret the pain," he finally said. "I regret the people I couldn't save. I regret every moment I wasn't there for your mother when she needed me. But I don't regret the path. The path brought me here to this moment, to these people. And this moment is pretty good. Even with your hand, even with everything you lost. Everything I lost taught me something I needed to learn, and everything I lost led me to something I needed to find." He looked at her. "It led me to you. It led me to this program. It led me to a life that matters, even if it's not the life I planned." Amara leaned against him. "I'm going to be a surgeon, Daddy, the best one. I'm going to do all the things you can't do anymore." "I know you will. And when I do, I'm going to think about you. Every surgery, every patient, every impossible case. I'm going to hear your voice in my ear, telling me to stay calm, telling me to trust my hands, telling me to never give up. Marcus couldn't speak. The tears came unbidden, rolling down his cheeks, and he didn't try to stop them. Your mama would be so proud of you, he finally managed. She'd be so proud of everything you've become. She'd be proud of you too, Daddy, for not giving up, for finding a way to keep healing even when you couldn't heal yourself. They sat together as the party swirled around them, father and daughter connected by something deeper than blood, by loss, by love, by the stubborn refusal to let darkness win. The ceremony was held on a brilliant Saturday morning in June. The new wing of Meridian Medical Center, the Sterling Williams Center for Medical Education, opened its doors to the largest crowd the hospital had ever seen. Governors and senators sat alongside janitors and cafeteria workers. Millionaire donors shared space with students from housing projects. The front row was reserved for the first cohort of Healing Futures graduates, now scattered across the country, but returned for this moment. Marcus stood at the podium looking out at the sea of faces. His right hand trembled against the wooden surface, but his voice was steady. 20 years ago, I operated on a man in a tent in Afghanistan. His name was Henry Sterling. He was a civilian doctor volunteering at a refugee camp, and he'd been shot trying to protect children from militia fighters. He should have died. The equipment was failing. The conditions were impossible, and I was running on no sleep and pure stubbornness. But I refused to let him go. I refused to accept that his story was over. He paused, gathering himself. Henry Sterling survived. He came back to this country and built a hospital dedicated to healing people who couldn't afford to be healed. He spent the rest of his life trying to make the world a little better than he found it. And he kept a photograph on his shelf for 20 years, a photograph of the surgeon who saved him, even though he never found out that surgeon's name. Victoria was crying in the front row. So was Edgar Morrison, and Maria and Destiny and Jalen and Chen. I didn't save Henry Sterling because I wanted recognition. I saved him because that's what healers do. We show up. We do the work. We refuse to give up even when giving up would be easier. And then we move on to the next patient, the next crisis, the next impossible situation. He looked at Amara, sitting beside Victoria, her white coat crisp and new, the youngest medical student in the program's history, accepted early because her scores were so exceptional. But here's what I've learned in the years since that night in Kandahar: healing isn't just about surgery. It's not about the fancy equipment, or the medical degrees, or the impossible saves. Healing is about connection. It's about seeing people as human beings, not as problems to be solved. It's about giving hope to people who've lost hope, and chances to people who've never had chances. He gestured to the building behind him. This center exists because of everyone in this room, because of Victoria, who found the courage to become the leader her father always knew she could be, because of the doctors and nurses who mentor our students every single day, because of the donors who believed in this vision, and because of the students, these brilliant, stubborn, unstoppable young people who refuse to accept that their circumstances define their futures. He stepped back from the podium. Henry Sterling saved my life as much as I saved his. He gave me a purpose when I'd lost my way. He reminded me that even when you lose your hands, you don't lose your ability to heal. You just find new ways to do it. He lifted his trembling right hand, the hand that had saved so many lives, the hand that could barely hold a pen anymore. These hands taught a young doctor to perform emergency surgery. These hands held a grieving girl when her family was torn apart. These hands signed the paperwork that gave dozens of students the chance to become healers themselves. They can't operate anymore, but they can still change the world. The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. People stood, people cheered. Someone started chanting Marcus's name, and the chant spread through the crowd like wildfire. But Marcus barely heard it. He was looking at Amara, at the tears streaming down her face, at the pride shining in her eyes. She mouthed the words across the distance between them. "I love you, Daddy." He mouthed them back, "I love you too, baby." The reception afterward was a blur of handshakes and photographs and speeches that Marcus didn't remember. Eventually, the crowd thinned, the caterers packed up, and the new building stood quiet in the fading afternoon light. Marcus found himself alone in the main lobby, standing in front of the dedication plaque. The Sterling Williams Center for Medical Education, dedicated to all who heal with their hands, their hearts, and their hope. Your life belongs to someone now. Use it well. He read his own words inscribed in bronze and felt the weight of everything they meant. Footsteps behind him. Amara appeared at his side, still wearing her white coat, still glowing from the ceremony. Everyone's asking where you went. They want more pictures. I needed a minute. I know. She slipped her hand into his, holding his trembling fingers steady, the way she'd been doing since she was 9 years old. It's a lot. It's everything. Everything I lost. Everything I found. Everything I built. It's all here in this building, in these walls. Not just in the building, Daddy. In the people. In Destiny and Jalen and Maria and all the students who came after them. In Dr. Chen and Dr. Hayes and Victoria. In me. She squeezed his hand. You taught us all what it means to heal. Not with surgery, but with showing up. With refusing to quit. With seeing people as people instead of problems. Marcus looked at his daughter, this fierce, brilliant, impossible miracle of a person, and felt his heart overflow. Your mother would be so proud of you. She is proud. I feel her sometimes when I'm studying late at night or when I nail a difficult diagnosis. I feel her right there beside me, cheering me on. I feel her too. They stood in silence, father and daughter, surrounded by the legacy they'd built together. Daddy. Yeah, baby. What happens now? Marcus thought about the question. He was 60 years old. His hand trembled constantly. His back ached from old injuries that had never fully healed. He had maybe 20 years left if he was lucky. But he also had a daughter who was going to change the world. He had students scattered across the country healing people in ways he'd never imagined. He had a program that would outlast him by generations, creating opportunities for young people who'd never had chances before. He had a legacy. Now we keep going, he said. We show up tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. We teach the next class of students. We help the next family in crisis. We save the next life that needs saving. And when we can't do that anymore, then someone else will. Someone we trained. Someone we inspired. Someone who heard our story and decided they wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves. He turned to face her. That's what legacy means, Amara. It's not about what we accomplish, it's about what we leave behind. And what we leave behind is hope. Amara hugged him fiercely the way she'd been hugging him since she was small, her arms tight around his waist, her head pressed against his chest. I'm going to make you so proud, Daddy. Every patient I save, every life I change, it's going to be because of you. It's going to be because of you. I just showed you the door. You're the one who walked through it. They stood together as the sun set over the city, casting long shadows across the lobby of the building that bore their name. Outside, the world kept spinning, people getting sick, people getting better, people finding their way to places like this where hope still existed. Marcus Williams had lost his ability to operate. He'd lost his wife, his career, his sense of purpose. He'd spent years mopping floors in a hospital where he'd once been a legend, invisible and forgotten. But he'd never lost the thing that mattered most, the belief that healing was possible, that people could change, that even the most broken among us could still make a difference. He'd proven it with his life. And now others would prove it with theirs. That was enough. That was everything. The tremor in his hand would never stop. The scars on his heart would never fully heal. But Marcus Williams had found his way home, not to a place, but to a purpose. Not to a title, but to a truth. Healing wasn't about what you could do with your hands. It was about what you were willing to do with your heart. And his heart broken and battered and still beating after everything had room enough to heal the world.